Hey everyone, welcome back to the Intelligent Conversations podcast. Today, I have the honor to learn from Kristine Scott. Kristine works at Seattle Conflict Resolution, which, just like it sounds, helps you resolve conflict. She wants to enable people to bring out our best selves. So I'm sure all of you are excited to learn from Kristine. I'm sure I am. So Kristine, thank you for coming on today. I appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you. I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
So kind of to just open up and start, dive into this, what kind of got you started at Seattle Conflict Resolution? What was kind of your initial draw to start that?
Well, I used to hate conflict. I'm from a small town, and in my 20s, I had jobs in social services where bad stuff would happen all the time. I was working with young people who lived outside. I was working with behaviorally disabled folks, and wow, I saw some stuff that just scared me, scared me completely, and I sucked at conflict. I never thought I'd become an expert in it, honestly. And then I started learning from the people that were living outside how they handled conflict, and realized that they actually had some mad skills, and I just needed to listen and learn.
So what was it, I mean, obviously you learned from like multiple people, but was there like a particular moment maybe where you're like, hey, like, why am I not doing this?
Yeah, there was a moment like when I was running Teen Feed, which is a meal program for homeless young people, that I noticed that a street dad actually had the capacity to calm down a whole room of just completely out of control young people with a simple phrase. Like he just had so much respect from his peers that they all instantly changed their behavior. And I thought, wow, if he can do that, imagine what I could do if I just got better at it. That was inspiring for me.
So I'm sure, right, you go and start out, right, like everyone else, it's like, okay, that is really cool, right? You look up to someone that's maybe put in that back end work, had the experience. What was your first experience trying to, I guess, learn conflict resolution?
There were many, many hundreds of mistakes. So what happens to most of us is our biology takes over, right? And when that happens, we come out way too aggressive because we are behaving exactly like a cornered animal, or we come out way too passive. In that case, we're kind of like the rabbit hiding under the bush, right? Our biology is, still with us after all of these thousands of years of evolution. And, that was very helpful when we were the predator or the prey to have that stuff. But I train people how to feel those symptoms of that biology taking over and how to sidestep them. Because, once that happens, that way too aggressive or that way too passive thing never works. I'm sure you could maybe think of times in your own life that one of those things happened to you.
Those times.
Yeah. So, a lot of mistakes early on. Now I tell people you have to de-escalate yourself first. Don't let that biology take over. And I also train folks, like, once you have that peace of mind and that clarity, just like really look at what's my purpose in this situation. What is my goal in the situation? Take care of myself in the situation. Forget what this other person is doing. As soon as I feel like, well, my goal is to control them, and to make them see my agenda. Nope, you're not ready. You're not ready for this engagement. You have to really get clear on your side. Like, just me, myself. What's my clear purpose? And I'm going to share a graphic with you that kind of walks you through what I call the three rings of conflict resolution. The first one is in the center. That's just about you. What's my purpose? What's my role in the situation? Where are the limits of my responsibility? Kind of like my stuff, your stuff. Like, I can't control you. I'm not responsible for your actions. And what are my clear boundaries about how those actions impact me?
I like that. Yeah, I think you touch on three. So I've just kind of put this out there. I've been thinking, like, when it comes to any engagement with anyone, I think there's like three rules that I'm trying to live by it. And I think they're a little bit similar. I want to kind of hear your comments after. But I think the first step is you have to respect, right? Whether it's a relationship with yourself or another person, there has to be that respect there first.
Yep.
And then the accountability factor, right? You have to hold each other to like, hey, like you said you were going to do this, like do it. And then the third thing is patience. I think if we are just patient with each other, I think a lot would get done, because I mean, we're all learning, we're all making mistakes, and that's just the reality of things. I don't know, what is that kind of what you're getting at a little bit?
Very similar. And one thing that you wisely pointed out is, if you can't do it for yourself, you can't do it for somebody else. Right.
Amen.
So you have to start like with that patience and that accountability for yourself. And then once you are ready to like talk to somebody else about that, you can just kind of go, okay, well, what's your accountability to you? Like forget your accountability to me, because really we got to take care of our own side of the fence here. And I would like my second ring in my circle is actually curiosity. Can I really be curious about this other person? Can I come into the conversation kind of like you did before we started talking, like, hey, I'm really like looking forward to what I learned from you. If you have that, then you're going to learn some really amazing things that you would have never considered, by engaging with this other person. You're going to ask open questions. You're going to avoid making any assumptions like, oh, well, they screwed up on their accountability to me by doing X, Y, and Z, therefore they don't like me. Like, ooh, once you go down that road, it's no longer an open conversation, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, I think you're right. I think that sometimes, right, we get into that trap of, and I admit it, right? It's like everyone sees the world from their kind of frame of view, but you have to realize, like, one of the great things, and also this is why we fight quite often, is that we're unique. We're different people, and we have different perspectives on things. We have different ways of doing things, different ways of solving problems and things like that.
Yeah, and we're really quick to assume that if somebody solves a problem differently or looks at us differently or engages with us differently than what we would do, that there's something wrong with them or with us. That's the first place we go. And I just remind people, no, because I used to run a shelter for homeless young people. And I just started beta testing this idea that I wonder if whenever I think somebody's mad at me, I wonder if I just went and asked them what was going on, what they would say. So I just started doing that. And 90% of the time, it had nothing to do with me at all. That I was the one that interpreted their looking in my direction or their comment that they made. Like I was the one that misinterpreted.
Huh. Yeah. We oftentimes find ourselves, I think we find ourselves kind of coming in with that preconceived idea of like, oh, this is what this person does, when reality is they have something to offer. And just kind of a little side note off that, just a question popped in my head. You mentioned you worked with homeless young people. How did you get into that? Like, that kind of sounds interesting.
Just through AmeriCorps. It was, AmeriCorps is kind of like our domestic Peace Corps, where you get underpaid for 9 months and, end up with some college money at the end of your term, and do social justice, social service, environmental protection kind of things. And I was just, I had a lot of misperceptions that I, as this, very wise, I think I was 28-year-old, I had something to offer these poor, confused street urchins. I had so many biases showing in privilege, not aware of kind of stuff. And I just came in and kind of got my butt handed to me, honestly, because they had a lot more wisdom and a lot more smarts than I did.
Well, it's true. I think ultimately, I'll take a couple steps back, but ultimately that's kind of the point of the show. It's like everyone's spending their time doing something, right? And for you to kind of just say, hey, look, they're not, like, they're dumb or whatever, and just kind of dismiss them. To me, it's like, no, they're not like completely dumb. They've been spending that time doing something. I think the question a lot of people confuse it with is it productive? Like, is it actually benefiting society as a whole? And that I think is the real question. Like, hey, is what this person doing productive? And I think that's something a lot of people, I mean, that's kind of why I started this show. It's like, hey, like there's a difference between being productive, being intelligent, and everyone has a chance to be, everyone's intelligent. It's just, you need to figure out what the heck you've been spending all your time doing and what you're good at.
And when you think about young people who, what they're producing is just being alive another day.
Yeah.
And they have amazing things to teach, and which is why I now get to teach. You know, at this point, I've taught over 35,000 people in how to resolve conflict. That would have never happened had I not spent 10 years working with young people from the streets. So like, look at the ripple effect. You know, the sad news is there was a lot of tragedy in those lives, a lot of people who died, a lot of people who experienced stuff that I never had to go through or heal from. But I'm really grateful for the lessons that I did learn by working with them.
So a little bit on that note, I mean, you saw a lot of people, like you mentioned, go through a lot of challenges. What would you say is kind of the best way for maybe people that are encountering their own challenges in their life, whether it's, you know, homelessness or just, you know, maybe something little in their lives? What's your advice to kind of overcome challenges? I
think, you know, it's just like conflict. If you face it like a wall that just looks really, really bigger than you, you tend not to believe in your own agency. It feels insurmountable. And if you see this other person like the same, you feel like you have to come out fighting. But what if this challenge is just another opportunity to grow, something that you get to listen to and learn from and be curious about, like, what is it that I'm like thinking about myself right now? What is this challenge showing me? What is this other person and this conflict with them showing me about myself? I have the pleasure of having 2 kids who are late teens, early 20s. And I get taught about myself all the time by engaging with them about like my ageism, around my, you know, the generational divide, and, you know, and what I'm learning as they're kind of pointing out all of my flaws is that there are some things in the perspective of people under 30 that I just can't access. I wasn't raised, you know, in the same digital era. I don't have access to the same patterns. And I don't know. It's just like, I'm really encouraged by people under 30 and their analysis on what's wrong with this planet and what's wrong with our society, and their interest in collaboration and their disinterest in hierarchy, and like, they have so much more going for them than my generation had at that age. But they also have a lot bigger obstacles. So anyway, I'm glad that you have a lot of younger listeners, because I just want to give you guys a big shout out. You know, like you guys inherited kind of a shit sandwich, and I'm really I can't think of a generation that's better skilled at staring it down.
Well, I guess on the behalf of that, thank you. That is, and I think that's kind of the cool part. I mean, you look at every generation and they kind of have their own unique challenges that they have to deal with. And I think as much as we all try to like get rid of these challenges, roadblocks, I think we kind of need them, because how else do we actually like progress as like being better? Because I would love to avoid a lot of things that in the past, and I think that's part of wisdom, right? It's learning from someone that's actually experienced it. Like, all right, let's not do that, because obviously it didn't work out.
Yeah.
And from there, we should learn from them and then make our own decisions. But the thing is, we're gonna make our own mistakes too, right? Like, I bet once our generation gets older, we're gonna look back and maybe, man, we made quite a few mistakes there, and then younger generations will be like, hey, screw you guys. And I think the process will just repeat. So,
and one mistake I made when I was younger, I'm sorry to interrupt, Josh, but I just hope I can spare your listeners from making the same mistake, is every time I had a conflict with another person, I thought there could only be one winner. And I needed to get rid of that. And now that I've like opened myself up to like, what's a compassionate, long-term, relationship-focused outcome, conflicts actually get resolved. Because if you win with a conflict, like if me and my son are fighting over who unloads the dishwasher, for example, and I get my way and he unloads the dishwasher, that's not resolved, because now all he feels like is that he lost the battle. And then tomorrow night, when the dishwasher needs to get unloaded again, right? It's the same.
Process repeats.
Exactly. It's the same bad mojo. So I really encourage people, like, look for the win-win, look for the permanent resolution to the conflict, something that both parties get to walk away from going, yeah, I feel closer to Josh, because like we really worked through that. I understand him better now.
No, I agree. I think that is ultimately like conflict resolution right there. It's we need to find a solution where both parties walk away and say, hey, like, I feel like I won, like I got what I want, right? So I guess kind of something on this end is usually what tends to happen, I think, is people will dig in their heels, right? Because it's like maybe they've never been challenged before. And that's the thing. Again, I think challenges are good. It helps you like really think about like, oh, like I never thought of it like that. But kind of the tendency is to dig in your heels and say, no, not tolerating that. I guess, how would we not do that?
Yeah. I think, a lot of the people that hire me are in customer service relationships. And so they're seeing conflict with a person that they'll probably never see again. So like if I work at the Seattle Space Needle, the chances of this one customer standing in front of me again is like next to nothing. So in that case, it's kind of hard to take my advice around focusing on the relationship, right? Because there's no relationship here. And so I just say, okay, let's focus on your capacity to do this job long term. If you keep having customer interactions that you're kind of feeling burned out and hating on your customers, 2 years from now, I can predict that you will either leave this field or you're going to just start becoming a really grumpy, resentful, burned out crisp of a person, right? And when I say that, I can just see everybody in the room like look around going, oh yeah, I know who the burned out people in my team are. So I encourage like, okay, so lean in for your own sanity, that you can restore your faith in these customers even when they're behaving badly, even if it's not for the relationship. But most of us, we're having conflict with people that we're going to see tomorrow. And then what I want you to be really motivated by is like, how do I want this conflict where we get to be raw, we get to be honest, we get to have big emotion in the room? How do I want to use all of that energy to deepen my connection with this person?
I like how you brought that up, that I think sometimes, right, there's a high amount of emotions in the room. It's because, right, there's a lot of passion usually behind like, no, like I want to do this. But honestly, that's where a lot of things get done.
Yep.
I mean, as sucky as it sounds, that's when a lot of things get done, because it's like
we get afraid of change, and change takes a certain amount of energy to get us out of that like stasis point. So yeah, we need the emotion, we need the charge.
It reminds me of like the Gordon Ramsay show and stuff where he's like yelling at these people, and then all of a sudden it's always like a 360. I'm like, I believe it. Like if someone was constantly just going after me like that and saying, why are you doing it? And like asking these tough questions, like, crap, like I just suck, man. Like I have nothing else to say. It's kind of those like confrontations. I think that's kind of what it reminded me of, is the Gordon Ramsay show.
Except the truth is we don't actually need to yell. We just need to be like that consistent invitation for a deeper relationship. So if somebody's kind of crossed your boundary and you know that your boundary is crossed, and you just keep on saying to them, kind of like, I had some people call me out at work. I used to be an executive director of a nonprofit. And I did something that was very much grounded in my privilege as an executive director and as a white lady, that did not hold true to a commitment I made to some people of color who were basically supervised by somebody I supervised. And they called me out on it, but they didn't do it by yelling at me. They actually spent an hour in the room just continuing to ask the question, like, well, you said this, but you did that. And why did that happen? What can we count on you for in the future? And not in a way that was like making me feel bad, but I did. I came out fighting. Yeah. I came out defensive, like, well, I'm the executive director and I get to make these. And like 30 minutes later, I was crying and admitting that, yeah, I had a choice and I made the wrong one. And thank you for like holding space for me to get to that realization by like kind of like you said, by being patient, being compassionate, and just asking the question.
Yeah, I think that right there, asking the question, I think is you have to have the courage to actually just ask it. And I think also, I mean, I've talked with communication coaches and I've had those guys on the show, and I think also usually when, you know, conflict arises, it's usually just a communication barrier as well. It's like, oh wait, I don't understand what are you saying to me? And the other person's trying to find the right words to put in their mouth, like, no, this is what I'm saying. And oftentimes, right, it may look like they're totally disagreeing with you, and it's like, no, it's I can't find the right words to communicate this to you. And right, and then they respond back and say, so do you mean this, right? And you're like, no. And I think that's where real learning happens, right? You don't learn based off just talking, you learn with questions. And I think that's an important point that you made. So I guess kind of on that note, I think a lot of people, especially in today's climate, they're like, man, I think social media is definitely not helping.
Yeah. Let's create a machine that allows you to be in an echo chamber with only the people that agree with you. That doesn't help. But I'm kind of curious, because I think there are some benefits, because I mean, this has been the most connected, I guess you could say. Like, people have been able to kind of find, like, some people have walked their entire lives feeling like utterly alone. Now all of a sudden they find, like, wait, there's people out there that just like me. And they can talk with them around the world. So I think there's a lot of benefits to it. And then obviously, as you mentioned, a lot of cons as well. But kind of on that, it's how do we kind of, I guess, create a space where we resolve conflict on social media? I guess it's kind of what I'm getting at. Yeah, there are some groups that are doing that around kind of through an impression lens, you know, where people are using social media to do and say like things that are racist or transphobic, et cetera, et cetera. I'll email this to you later because I'm trying to remember the name of the organization that actually gives you tips for how to intervene or interrupt when you see those kinds of things happening in an online space. But there's a local author here who's done some pretty really great social justice stuff, who, when she has this thing happen on her social media, what she does is she reaches out to the person in a private chat and just says, hey, I'd really like to talk to you kind of in real time. Can we get on the phone together? So rather than having the baiting that this person is trying to do in her direction as a social justice person, rather than it being this big public conflict and debate, she's basically inviting them into a private conversation. And once you do that with somebody, whether that's in real life or in an internet space, you quickly separate the people who actually want to engage in the topic from the people who want to have an audience. Because the people who want to have an audience, this isn't really a conflict, this is grandstanding. And that's when it's appropriate, you know, to get them off your page or whatever you need to do, because you don't want to share your audience with those types of folks.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And I guess on the other side of things, I think some people may be concerned, like if we just kind of remove people, or like these platforms, for example, it's a free speech issue. I kind of want to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's definitely a free speech issue. And that's why it's really important how our spaces are curated. You know, as you know, Facebook now has their own their own organization that's actually actively looking into how do we keep these spaces safe and free for everybody's expression. We're still figuring that out as a democracy. We're still figuring that out when it comes to our media platforms. And, you know, I just have to remind folks, again, it's not about this win-win idea. It's about, can I learn from you? Can I listen to you? Can we have a sharing of equals without one person coming out with their jugular missing? And we've lost that decorum around engaging in tough topics, right? You look at what's happening at school boards. You look at what's happening on our streets. It's gotten ugly. And I just kind of feel like everybody came out of the pandemic with less mental health, with more addiction, with more isolation, and like emotional social skills that just went backwards for like years. You know, it's just like everybody's behaving like toddlers, and it's not working. It's definitely not giving us the resources for these difficult conversations that we need to have.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm going to use this as the intelligent question of the day. What would you say then some of those difficult conversations maybe we do need to have are?
Oh, there's like this huge number of revolutions that are happening right now around gender, around race, around wealth and class, around property ownership, around the environment. Like every question is being asked of us right now. And all of them are full of conflict. And I have an offer for your listeners. I actually have a difficult conversation worksheet that gives you advice about, okay, here are the steps you need to go through to work on your own stuff. Here are the ways to ask for this other person to have a conversation with you. And here are the things you need to invite into that room when you do have that conversation. Because the more we can do that, and the more we can work through all of this stuff that right now feels like a big divider, the brighter and better our future is going to be.
The intelligent answer of the day. And I think, so kind of follow up on that, I think right now, one side wants to eradicate the other. I think that's actually a pretty terrible idea. And it's because you need to have those opposing, again, people that actually are willing to challenge you and say, no, I don't really think, and kind of, have that conversation saying, hey, like, let's try and find something where we both come out as winners. And so I guess kind of to follow up on that, how do we not do that?
Yeah, we definitely have to do our own work first, and also discover where our non-negotiables are. I have a few friends that are people of color, and when I talk to them about Black Lives Matter and things like that, I've asked them, like, what's your biggest goal? And when a friend said to me, my biggest goal is that people who look like me aren't going to be killed at the hands of our police. Like, yeah, I can get behind that. That feels like something that shouldn't ever be like, who would say that should happen? Like, okay, yeah, let's get behind that. And if folks want to fight that, then fine. I'm that's a boundary that I'm happy with.
I think maybe kind of, again, to offer the others, I think more of the problems, maybe the solution. So it's like, I think we're really good at identifying the problem. It's like, no one looks at, like, when that happens and it's like, man, I'm all for it, right? It's like, no one looks at it like that. But I think the real conflict's like, all right, so how are we going to actually provide a real solution to this?
Yeah. And that's, you're right. That's the next step of a true conversation is, what's the pain point that the folks on the other side are feeling as relates to the way our criminal justice system works. And if their pain point isn't the same as this first group, can they at least listen and learn from it?
Well, Kristine, thank you for coming on today. I'm sure everyone that's listening right now learned a lot, and I know I learned a lot. So if people want to reach out to you, social media or receive training, etc., etc., what's the best way they can find you, reach out to you, all that fun stuff?
Yeah, my website is seattleconflictresolution.com. So just find me on there. And I do want your listeners to get that difficult conversation worksheet from me. And in exchange, I will gladly capture their email address and send them an email. One of the things I'm releasing, I might even be out by the time this podcast is released, is a video, an interactive training video that's kind of part game, part YouTube clips of people behaving really badly. And it is basically a training that walks you through what to do as you guide your avatar through these difficult conversations.
There you go. And I'll be sure to, for the listeners, I'll be sure to add that link in whether you're listening on Spotify or watching this on YouTube. So, Kristine, thank you for coming on today. I appreciate you taking the time to come on today.
Yeah, thank you, Josh.
All right, everyone, as you can tell, that is Kristine Scott. She's a very intelligent person, has great things to say. I challenge you guys, if anything you heard today spoke to you, to reach out to her. I'm sure Kristine would love to hear from you. Stay tuned till next week. We have a great guest lined up for you guys. See you guys next week, and let's get after it. Hey everyone, if you liked this episode and would like to hear more, be sure to hit that subscribe or follow button. We release a new episode every Wednesday for you guys to listen to. Thank you guys so much for the support that you give. We could not have done this without you guys. If you would like to be a potential guest on the show, check out intelligentconvos.com and fill out the form there. Thank you guys again, and let's get after it.